A requirement for the exercise is you have a group of images which represent the research or inspiration for your design direction. And you can organize those images any way you choose, but a really common way is to organize them into an image gallery. Whatever approach you take, another requirement is you need to include an image title, and it's best to have image captions or image descriptions. Matter of fact, this would probably be a really good place if you are using royalty-free or found content, that this would be a great place or a great way to credit the content is within the description. All right, so it would be easy just to add a title or a headline and a description above, below, to the side of the image, but that kind of might mess up the gallery effect, if you will. So let's look at an approach for making the headline and the description available when we hover over the image. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to use Dreamweaver for this demo. So let's go ahead and make a new file. This will be an HTML file. And every document should have a clear title, so we'll just call this simple image hover. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom. I'll just do Command plus, Command minus will zoom out. So just zoom in on the code so it's a little easier to see. And Dreamweaver doesn't give you the language, but to meet current semantic standards, we should include the language we're going to use on the page. In my case, the language will be English. Okay. Now, the next thing we need to do is, well, we should save. All right, so I'm going to save, and I'll call this hover demo, and I'll just save it inside my root level folder, which I have for this particular exercise. Okay, let's go ahead and create the outline. So we're going to begin with a simple div element, and then inside of our div element we're going to add our image. And our source will be, and let's go ahead and I'll just look in my images folder and then my gallery folder, and I'll go with this image here, and we should always include an alt. And my alt will be, this is a steampunk top hat, I believe. Okay, and I can hover over this, and yes, it is a top hat. Okay, so we should now end or close our inline image element, and we should complete our block level div element like so. And then it's a good idea just to get in the habit of saving just in case something happens. All right. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look. We have our image showing up perfectly fine. Let's go ahead now and begin to create the styles for our image, and then we'll add our hover effect. Okay, so what we need to do next is for this demo, I'm going to place my CSS document level, and then I will move the CSS to an external file. But while I'm working, it might be easiest just to create our rules inside. So let's go ahead and open a style element, and we'll close our style element. All right, so I'm going to pause the video real quick and just put in some CSS, which there's no reason to watch me type it. All right, so I've added in basically my HTML body, and where we zero out the margin and the padding. We're just going to set our font size, and then just a little mini reset here, box sizing, border box. Now we need to add the class so we can target this div, because we're going to have multiple divs holding images, because that's the strategy we're going to take for creating our gallery. So we'll use a class. Class equals, and I'm going to call this one my image. Like so. All right, so following our box sizing, let's go ahead and add our class my image. And what we're going to do is we will set the position to absolute, and then our image, if I hover over my image, I'll see my image is 400 by 266. So let's make the width 400 px, and the height, we could set the height to 266, but I want the image to create the height. All right, and in that case we can set the height of our element to auto. Now you can set the height to an absolute number. In our case it would be 266, but again, if we want this to be a little more modular, if we want the images to be able to scale potentially, then it would be best to set the height to auto, okay? Because the images are in line, and whatever their width, and we'll set the correct height also. Okay, so next what we need to do is I want to make sure that anything outside of this element potentially is not seen. So we're going to set the overflow to hidden. Okay, and just so we can see what's going on here, let's go ahead and add a border of 1 pixel solid, and we'll just call this out to be black, and we will save, and this is what we have so far, okay, which is perfect. Now what we need to do is I want, when I hover over this image, I'm going to use a mask, or often we'll call it an overlay, and I want that overlay to come into the image area. And there's many ways you can do this. Let's just look at bringing our overlay in from the bottom up. Okay, so next what we need to do is create that overlay. And I'm going to use just a div, like so. Okay, and we'll attach a class. So our class equals, and we will use overlay. That's what I'm going to call the element which is going to overlay the image. Now, to save a little bit of time, I'll just copy my image, and we will paste, and I'll change this class name to overlay. And I'm going to change, well actually, I'm going to change this position to relative. All right, so my image will be relative position, And that is because I want this image to move around inside of another area relative to the elements around it. Okay, but overlay, I want overlay to be absolutely positioned inside of the my image element. So we will set the top to 0, and we will set the left to 0. The width, I'm not going to take a chance on this element becoming wider than my image, so I'll set the width to 100%. The height can not be auto at this moment because there's nothing inside. So we're going to have to set the height of our overlay to 266. All right. And the overflow can remain hidden. We don't need to worry about overflow or the border, but we will place a background. Now I could call out background color, or we could just use the shorthand version and say background. And I want the background to be a color, so I'll just use the color picker, which is a nice feature here in Dreamweaver, and it's off the screen here, but I'm going to use sort of a jewel tone color. So let's kind of find a dark color that we like here, and then we'll just kind of make of a jewel tone out of this. All right, I like that one there. So let's go ahead and press return to set our color, and we will make sure we have our semicolon. And let's go ahead and save, and we will now see our image. Okay, well, we won't, we'll see this color, but there's this little funky space here, and that's what an image will do inside of another element. Okay, it's just the nature of an image, of an inline element, and it has to do with how the text would become aligned with the bottom or the side or the top. So this is a little fix that we need to take care of here. So what I'm going to do is let's go back to my image, and that's because we're setting a font size here. Okay, so everything's going to be any font will be based off of this size, and because that image inside is in an old school way dealt with baseline, top, and middle as far as alignment of the type to the image in old school HTML, if you will, that is creating a problem for us. So what we need to do is drop underneath border, and we are going to set the font size to 0, and then we will save. And you will notice that that space went away. Okay? All right, so what we need to do now is get our overlay to hover correctly. So for it to work correctly, we need overlay out of the way. Okay, so I am going to set the top to 266 pixels. So this will move our overlay down, and you'll notice that that overlay is no longer seen because it's down here, and we're telling the overflow of my image to be hidden. Okay, so now we need to get the overlay back. So what we're going to do is on my image, what we're going to do is hover my image, and we're going to tell overlay to change its top position. All right, so let's go ahead and do dot my image colon, and we're going to use the hover pseudo, and then what we're going to do is target overlay specifically. Okay, let's go ahead and add our curly braces, and what we're going to do is we're going to tell overlay to change its top position. So we'll just copy top, paste in, and we will change the top to 0. And we'll go ahead and save. And then when we hover, that overlay will move up. Well, that's fine, but I want this to have a little more animation to it. So let's go ahead and go to our overlay, and we will add a CSS transition. So transition, we'll just target all properties, and I want this to happen in 0.4 seconds, and I want the velocity of this to have a curve. So we will say ease in out. Okay. So it will accelerate, it'll reach its full acceleration, and then it'll decelerate. Now this is in 0.4 seconds, so it's not super noticeable, but I still like to go with this velocity. So let's go ahead and save. And now you'll see that our overlay comes in. Well, that's fine, but I want to still see the image a little bit. So let's go ahead and change, because we're using RGBA, I can change this to 0.9. And I can even go as far as say 0.90 here. And we will save, and when we hover, we will slightly be able to see the top hat underneath. Okay, so now what we're going to do is scroll down, and inside of the overlay, because it's the easiest way to do it, let's go ahead and add an H1, and we'll say, or we'll type in Steampunk top hat, and let's go ahead and close our H1. We will add a P tag, and this is, let's do brief description. Brief description. Boy, I really messed that up. Brief description of our image. See, I tried typing without looking at my fingers, and I blew it. All right, so let's go ahead and save. And what we need to do now is style H1 and P. And these are inside of overlay. So let's go ahead and target overlay, and we'll do overlay H1. So position will be relative, and we'll set, instead of margin, I'm going to go ahead and use top and right to move our relative position. So let's go top 50px and left 0 px. And we'll set, we don't have to call out the width because the width would automatically be 100%, but just so we know, let's go ahead and put width 100%. Make sure I have my semicolon. Then height, we'll let height be set to auto, so the height will be based on what's inside. Then we'll do text align center, and we should add some color, and let's just do I'll just do white, but we'll do it with a RGBA. Make sure we have our semicolon, and then we need to call out a font size. And I'm going to try 32px. And I believe we should be good. So I'm going to go ahead and just use overlay H1. Need to tab this over, and we'll change H1 to P, and we will target the P tag. And let's go ahead and just change the top to 30, so it'll be 30 pixels down under the baseline of the H1, and we should be able to keep everything else the same. So let's go ahead and save. And we now have our image. I believe I forgot to change the pixel size. So about 18, which works out a little better. Okay, so there we go. We now have an image which we can hover over. We can bring up an overlay, and that overlay contains a title, and we can have a description, and you could also place information, so you could cite where you found a particular image and credit that source. All right, so in the next video, before we go on to the next video, I just want to point out that I based the overlay, okay? So the overlay, top and left, okay? And then what we did is on our hover, we just set the top to 0, so it came up. But you could have the image, you could have that overlay come down. You could have the image, the overlay come from the left, from the right. You can change its size. You could fade it from 0 color to 0.9 in its opacity. There's more than one way to approach this. So that I'll leave up to you and your own creativity. In the next video, we will take our single image and we will make a gallery, and we will use FLEXBOX to make the gallery responsive.